Happy Friday. Good morning. How are you all doing? Hi, Heather from Maine. You're amazing. Hi, Mariam. And Mariam's in lockdown because you're in England. Where are you in England? Just want to double check the video's okay. Yes, it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm in Hampshire, quite near to Winchester, actually. So we're thinking we might get snow tomorrow, but we might not. That's England for you. How are you all doing today? Now, once everyone starts to arrive, it is really cold outside. That suggests to me that you're further north. It's not so cold here, but it's not particularly warm either. Hi there. Good morning, Kim. Wolf. Hi there. Where are you all? Tell me where you are and tell me what's on your needles as well. Have to know what's on your needles. I will share what's on my needles. You'll see even more of it in a few weeks. Hi, Isabel. And this is on my needles. There you go. It's a triangle at the moment. Wolf is in the UK. We've got lockdown happening here, all sorts of things happening here. And it's cold. We're possibly getting snow tomorrow. Oh, dear. Right, Mariam, all my circular needles broke. Oh, no. Can't knit anything in the round except something small. How did that happen? Crikey. Kim is in Bristol, knitting a slouchy hat. Janvi's here. She's in India. How on earth did you break all of your needles, Mariam? That's a disaster. Yes, Janvi, I remember you. Wolf is knitting an you have to write that, don't you? Make me amigurumi. I'm not sure how you spell it either. Oh no. Oh dear. They were cheap, so the cord came apart. Yeah, been there, done that. I got a whole pack of them from eBay once. I actually have still got some of them, but the joins aren't that good. It's kind of got a bridge between them, so the stitches don't move very well. I got a whole thing about circular needles. That was a big mistake, especially as I didn't use very many circular needles at that point. Getting them all in the different sizes, and they were only 40 or 60 centimeters long, so I couldn't do anything really big on it. So yeah, I could only, yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? I'm using new ones actually. I definitely recommend these. We'll have these in the shop soon. Knit Pro Fixed for certain projects, definitely worth it. Because fixed are better if you've got a big weight to them. Hannah, can you crochet? Yes. I struggle because holding the crochet hook actually gives me cramp. So I have to stop and start, stop and start. I mean, that's the same with writing. It's been the same since I've been a child. So I do crochet. I can crochet. I've done it really interesting crochet actually when I've not had such a big problem. I think half the problem is it's cold here. I made myself a really lovely triangular shawl when I was in my late teens. Don't know whether you know the 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. She had a granny square blanket wrapped around her at some point, the main character in that. And I thought, I have to have one of them at some point. So I made myself a granny square shawl. I can't see Tiffany, Janvi. Not quite yet. Maybe she's asleep this time because it was, I don't know, 5 o'clock in the morning when she was up last time. Hi there, Tiffany, if you're watching the replay. Rose, hi, yes. Currently trying out different ribs and seeing which one I like for a cardigan. The pattern says knit 2, purl 2. Do I have a favourite rib or cardigans? or do you always follow the pattern? I generally follow the pattern because the rib will, some ribs can scrunch the stitches together more than others, and then if it's a good designer, they will then have evened it out with decreasing or increasing or staying as it is, as you move away from the rib and into the other pattern. So there's usually some decent thought behind why it's a certain rib. I made a cardigan once with a beautiful fisherman's rib, um, and I actually really liked that. Cheap wool didn't last very long. It's such a shame. Such a shame. Oh dear. So yeah, I do tend to follow the pattern because if you look further in the pattern, is there increasing and decreasing as you move into the next bit of the pattern? Look at the photograph as well. Does it look really well ordered and centered as you move into the next part of the pattern, or is it kind of baggy as you go out? And then it hasn't had much thought behind it. So definitely look at the pattern, look at the photographs, and yeah, it really could depend on a couple of things. Mariam, I was knitting and I lost 40 stitches. Ugh. They snagged and pulled the cord, came apart. Oh dear. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Oh, that's such a shame. I do have putting stitches back on needles. That's one of my YouTube videos. I think it's in the tips and tricks or knitting help playlist if you ever want that. Jan V brought her knitting with her. Yes. Elizabeth, yeah, that's very annoying. I can't imagine. I mean, I remember when I've knitted, and because it's not a fixed circular, it's a interchangeable circular, the cords come off. That is annoying because then it's making sure everything is in there when you refix it. Wolf, I need to know your name. I have wool for 4mm needles that they recently broke. Would it be okay to use 4.5 or would it ruin what you're knitting? It depends on whether you've started to knit it, and it depends on what it is. If it's a scarf, hat, shouldn't really matter. But if it's something that is very specific, needs to be a very certain size when you've finished, then it's really not a good idea. Interchanging DK yarn for 4mm instead of 4.5 or the other way around shouldn't be a big problem. It's going to be a looser. Janvi, do you mean PM? Because if you're in India, it's forward. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting distracted. If you switch out the needles, for a larger needle, it will be a looser fabric. If you switch out the needles for a thinner needle, then it will be a tighter fabric. So all of those things do come into play. Does make a difference. Just try a swatch if you want to, see how it feels, and it really will depend on whether it's a specific size when you finish knitting it that it has to be. Then you'll know whether you really should even consider this, or even just completely try something else. Or get new needles. It is 10:51, yes. 10:53 now. Rosie, would you prefer wooden or metal knitting needles? I used to knit with metal. Absolutely loved knitting with metal. All the way through my teens, I used these a lot. Basically, they were my go-to. Oh, what am I knitting? Pick these needles up. Because I basically knitted with DK yarn when I was that age. Didn't really knit with anything else. And my mum, I think, pulled them out of her collection and said, here you are. And that was it. I was just knitting with them. The size 8 and 10. If you're a UK knitter, you'll know what that means. They're 3.25mm and 4mm. And there's a 9 in there, which is 4.5. So I used to knit with metal. And then when I picked knitting up in a bigger way in my late 20s, I started to think, what's going wrong? Why is it hurting? And they are arrows and needles, yes. And I actually looked it up because by then we had the internet. I looked it up and I realized that the vibrations of the metal needles banging together, I could even feel that now, were actually going through the tendons and the bones in my arms. So I was feeling the pain all the way through my arm and even up to my elbow. So I stopped using metal, which I find really frustrating because I've got these beautiful ones from my grandmother, blue, pink, and yellow metal needles. I think I'm just going to keep them for life because I love them so much. Absolutely adorable. I'll pass them on to my niece, I think. But I don't use metal ones anymore. Basically for that reason. I use bamboo if what I'm knitting is light and small, and if what I'm knitting is heavy, I tend to use wood because they're less likely to bend or even snap. Some cheap bamboo ones will snap. So yeah, it's personal choice. And actually these metal ones are quite good because they do have that bit of friction in them. If they're cheap metal, then they are far too slippery and the stitches will just very likely just fall off. So this personal choice, see what works for you. I've moved away from metal and I use bamboo or wood now. Some of the wooden ones that I was using a while ago, they were far too heavy, but I found birch now and they are much, much better. Okay. Mariam says, a few months ago, I shopped for chunky yarn and accidentally ordered 2 huge parts to go. Oh dear. Elizabeth, I find type of needles dependent on what type of yarn you're knitting with too. Yeah, it can. It can depend on it. Yeah, definitely. But it can also depend what's sitting in your pot and what's empty. Rose is doing a vintage pattern from the 40s, and I've only seen one photo of it. Made modern day in DK. They seem to do knit to, purl to. Sadly, there's nothing on Ravelry. It's meant to be quite fitted to the body. Okay. Go for knit to, purl to then. I really would, because it can just change the look of it. A beautiful waist with the rib, it would be quite fitted, so I'd go for that. Bamboo needles bent. I'll go straight again. That's because what you were knitting was too heavy as well. It could be that, but it could be just that you sat on them. But that's why I use birch if I know what I'm going to be knitting is that little bit more heavy. Hi Jane, welcome. I have to say I like metal needles. Yeah, except for very chunky knits when I have some wooden needles in larger sizes. Cool. Yeah, brilliant. It works for you. It works for you. Everyone, tell me what's on your needles. Rose is knitting her vintage cardigan, but what are you also knitting? Wolf is knitting the amigurumi, and Elizabeth is trying to finish her blanket. Oh, cool! And she's in Surrey, not far away. I mean, you consider that Janvi's in India and Heather's in Maine, USA. You're not far away. And Kim's in Bristol is knitting the slouchy hat. Okay, you've shared, haven't you? Kim, I used to use metal needles. Now I use pro knit circular needles or wooden double pointed. Rose is in Surrey as well. There you go. When this is all over, I will definitely do some in-person workshops. You're not that far away, are you? Knit Pro. That's what I've chosen. They have a really lovely backstory to Knit Pro. The sustainability, the way that they hire people. They mainly use factories in India, and anyone, absolutely anyone who knocks on the door and says, I need a job, is hired, which I absolutely love because they work with the community which they create their items. So brilliant. Absolutely love that. Jane is knitting a baby jumper. She's knitting them for her sons, nieces, nephews, and they've all reached that certain age. Oh, goodness. When you get to the age of 3 or 4, then you're winning because it might last a couple of years instead of 3 months. Is it normal for metal needles to be more silver at the tip? Yes, definitely, because they basically kind of coat them with a bit of paint, kind of just to give them that little bit more friction. So definitely, mine have got, yeah, silvery tips. Just oh, you're boiling in South Africa, Rosie. Yes, I'm cold. Definitely cold. I got my winter jumper on again. Oh dear. So, if anyone was watching the New Year video, I mentioned this last week. How's your 3-month goal going? We've all got this 3 month ahead of us. Kind of go, okay, we're in lockdown, vaccines rolling out, everything's still kind of shut down, and we can't go anywhere. Have you kind of thought about that phase of the year? I thought this is what I'd like to knit. Has any of you thought about that? I mean, I know what I'm knitting for this phase of the year. I'm gonna hopefully finish what I'm knitting within the next week or so, and then I've got new things to knit that are kind of written down. I know what I'm going to do. How about you? Elizabeth, I've just finished 2 baby cardigans for work colleagues' babies. Oh, that's sweet. Baby knitting is lovely. It's in some ways it's lovely. In other ways, I think it's only going to last 3 months, but it only lasts 3 months on that baby. And then, I mean, just we don't have children ourselves, so we've never gone through this. But the families where one thing goes to the next family, to the next family, to the next family, to the next family, just in our neighbourhood, it's astonishing. So it goes through this whole journey, and that's what I feel when you knit something like that. It's not just for that single person, that single baby. It just goes on that journey. You're releasing it into the world. All that love that you've put into it, just released every time that someone takes hold of it and gives it a new life. Very philosophical of me, but Wolf, I'm taking up knitting for a full-time hobby. Yes! And I'm looking into making more in-depth, time-consuming projects. Ooh, that's exciting. Go Wolf, go Wolf. What's your name? I'll start calling you Lupin in a minute. Jane, not only is baby knitting lovely, it's also very quick. Yeah, I have to agree. But if you're using a thinner needle, you could actually be using the same number of stitches, as if you're knitting an adult chunky cardigan. Carol, hi there, Carol. Okay, Lupin is out. Not calling you Lupin anymore. Oh dear. Leslie, I'm knitting a snood and a cardigan. I'm going to make a hat and fingerless gloves to go with the snood afterwards. Oh, that's cool. That's a whole set. That's and I love that. It's really kind of keeps you motivated as well. You go, oh crikey, that's good. I know what I'm doing there. And I can move on and do that. And then I've got that. Yes, like that. Love that. Oh dear, Marion's power just went off. That's not good. Danny, hi Danny. I'm sure you've commented on my videos this week. I love your videos. Thank you. I've learned a lot from watching them. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm knitting a monkey for your dog. That's cool because all the toys I buy, she tears. Oh dear. I hope that's not a bad omen for what you're knitting her. Will it last? Elizabeth. Yes. First time I've ever finished a cardigan was a baby one. Having said that it might be the same number of stitches as a chunky cardigan, you don't need to knit really long arms, do you? It's just like 3 inches and you're done. Rosie, doing really well. My project is huge. The project is a big sleeping bag with multicolored squares. Oh, that is very cool. I've never known anyone knit a sleeping bag before. I know the mermaid's tails that you knit for kids, but a sleeping bag, that's a really cool idea. Sleep sacks. for the babies. They are lovely. Carrots. Have you ever knitted filled art patterns? They were mostly made on very small needles. No, never come across them. Mariam, I had loose stitches, so I unraveled my work, and literally a second later, I found a video that would help. But it's probably a good idea because then you're moving back into a better tension and starting even just a section of it again with a better tension would really help the finished result. Leslie is using yarn from her stash. Mum passed away nearly a year ago. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. My condolences, Leslie. And she was a knitter. We had quite a big stash between us. I'm wondering how much yarn my mum's got hidden away. I gave her some yarn for Christmas actually, and she's just finished knitting with it. So I was pleased about that because she said, all right, I'm going to give it to someone for Christmas. And it's just, and she was really pleased to have that different yarn to sit and knit with, keep her quiet, give her something to do. And I said, it's about the process, isn't it? She said, yes, it is. Yes. Mariam, she's ancient knitting, had a gauge 36 stitches and 40 rows per inch. Per 4 inches? Surely not per inch. You'd need a machine to knit that. Goodness me. The book I'm reading talks about old knitting and the tiny needles that they used to use, but 36 inches and 40 rows per inch. My goodness, that's a lot. But the really fine work that you find on a lot of the old celebrated Farrell patterns, they're very small. I certainly see this kind of thing I buy because it's such tiny stitches I wouldn't be able to knit it myself. So it would take forever, Elizabeth, you're right. Oh my goodness me. Right. I did want to talk about a couple of things actually, because I've had lots of comments this week. Cycles of creativity. Someone mentioned this week because she was going through what she was knitting. She watched my New Year video about cycles of knitting. She said, I tend to knit in the winter. I know what I'm knitting for the next 3 months, and then April comes and I start to go in the garden. And then September, October, I knit for Christmas. So she does have these cycles. And cycles of creativity work really, really well like that. Because you can do more stuff in the garden, outside, if you're going, I mean, even if you're someone who does rafting or climbing in the summer, you can spend more time doing that. And then you come home and do some knitting in the evening if you want, but it won't be a big part of your day like it might be in the winter. So it's a really interesting thought to just move that kind of idea into your creative cycle in the year. So this is why, another reason why this 3 months idea is a really good thing. It's okay, how much am I going to focus on knitting at the moment? And I will talk about this as well as we move out of lockdown and things start to change again in the spring and the summer. It's like, how do I keep knitting? Because we've all recognized how helpful it is and what a big part of bringing joy into your life it can be. So it can really, really help to just consider it and just pause and say, do I want this? Don't I want this? How can I move it into my life more? How can I bring it into my life so it doesn't feel like almost like something you've got to force yourself to do? It's like going to the yoga mat every day. That can feel like a struggle. It's like, oh, I've got to get the mat out. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. Every evening, the yoga mat comes out, and it basically, I don't have a space for it. I don't have to clear a coffee table out of the way or anything. This rug on the floor is there, and I just roll the mat out because that is right close by to hand. Boom. Switch the television on, and YouTube app goes straight on, and Yoga with Adrienne is waiting for me. And that is how simple it can be. And same with knitting. If your knitting bag is sat there by the sofa, you sit down for half an hour after dinner in the evening, and it's a real pleasure and a joy. And you can move that into your life so it feels normal rather than feeling, oh, I really need to do some knitting today, don't I? Because I want to finish that thing. I want to do some knitting. It's an absolute pleasure. So we will talk more about that as lockdown moves out and we get out into the open air again. How can we keep this creativity as part of our lives and not say, oh, I'm not sure it can actually fit in my day anymore. So so I really liked that comment. It's just saying I actually consciously know that there are cycles of creativity in the year. That's it. Well, embrace it. You know, it's something that you may not even have noticed, but that's it. There you go. Ah, dear. Danny says, that's so funny. Oh dear. I've got to remember all your names. Where's Lupin? Carol. Carol says, I once tried knitting with chopsticks. Why not? Absolutely. Someone decided at one point to start knitting with broom handles, and look what we ended up doing. Danny says, I don't mind her tearing this toy because it hasn't cost anything. I'm making it with bonbon yarns I had stashed away and nothing to do with them. Yes, that's fine. A friend took my knitting off the needles. Oh no! Oh dear. Oh. Leslie, my mum learnt to knit on metal skewers in wartime. Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. And if they're double-ended, then you can knit them around. Christina. Hi, Christina. I love knitting, but struggle to stitch my knitting together so my projects get dumped. You probably need to go into some of my courses, which have got more of the seaming in them. I do have a playlist on here about finishing your knits that I go into greater depth, and I show it to finer detail in some of the courses. So whatever it is that you're knitting, just think about doing them. It's practice. If you've never really held a sewing needle before, then that can be the problem. It's like, oh, I'm not really sure I want to do this. The other thing is to start finding projects where you don't need to do as much seaming. You can knit sweaters in the round. You can knit cardigans where the front and the back, both the fronts and the back, are all on the needle, really long needle. And it feels a lot easier to keep knitting and to continue. And you won't have to put it together at the end. And sometimes, very cleverly, they will actually have a couple of stitches that are just out of place, going so that the seam is noticed. So the seam feels right. It feels as if it's there, but you haven't actually sewn it together. So think about what projects you're doing as well. That can be a big part of it. Find someone to sew them together for you. Swap. Someone does your sewing together, you make them some muffins. Just think about that. You may well be able to do something like that to see what kind of thing works for you. Rose, up until last weekend, I had to get my boyfriend to look at my knitting chest of drawers. He thought my wool stash consisted of one bag. He got a shock. Yeah, they will get a shock. Now that we're selling wool, this is a bit of a shock even to me. The kitchen stitch stopped soldiers from dying in the World War when it was invented for sock toes. Their legs would usually have to be amputated because of disease. Okay, kitchen stitch meant that it didn't get as damp and gangrenous. That's interesting. Rosie, my son actually knitted me a lovely sort of circular scarf with circular needles that look professional. It can do. The idea of circular needles, Cafe Facet, Cave Facet does some lovely circular scarves. I think I think that's what you mean. Do you mean never-ending scarf that just is a really long cowl. But the circular scarves that are just really long tubes, they're lovely. Rose. Yes, evening. Adrienne is right in saying the hardest thing to get me to the mat. Yes, it absolutely is. It is difficult to get to the mat. It's difficult to pick up the knitting needles, and ten, you suddenly go, oh, so pleased I did that. Yes. Ah, Kim does sewing in the summer. There you go. So we can have these. Oh, got a light going all funny. There you go. That's better. We can have these cycles of creativity, and it just switches from one to the other. Yeah, they do, Mariam. It can be like that. Yeah. Mariam finished a pair of fingerless mitts, and one was smaller than the other by 2 rows. They look different. Yeah. I made a mistake once when I was knitting fingerless mitts in a pair, and I did a rib that was that long and a rib that was that long for the cuff. Didn't really notice when I was wearing them, but if you kind of hold them together, if I wasn't wearing them, that one's quite small. Carol, is there a technical term for the invisible stitch, or is that its name? Um, Invisible stitching in seams, generally it's called the mattress stitch. That's what I use for my seaming, for most of my seaming. I've been making these, and I've finished these scrunchies, and where I was just kind of testing different seaming approaches. I was doing a bit of oversewing, but most of the long seams were mattress stitch. Put this light again. Most of the long seams were mattress stitch. Um, it does give a really nice edge to it. There you go. That's the scrunchie I was showing you the other week. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. And obviously, you must know, because you've been here and you're really taking notice of what I'm talking about every week. That means, and then my glasses came. You are. I got my reading glasses. It doesn't really work for the computer. I was hoping they'd be fine for the computer, but not brilliantly. I'm just going to close that curtain a bit. Because reading glasses are made so that your pupils will look into a fixed point, whereas computers further ahead. So they've got a blue light filter on them too, so that's really helpful. That's what I was using. These are what I was wearing when I was knitting up these. So there you go. I will put these on the shop soon. I've got other things going on with the website at the moment. I'm not sure how long the new website will take. I'm hoping it might be in a couple of weeks, but I'm not sure. Looks like there might be more jobs than we've anticipated. There you go. So I'm really quite happy with these. Lots of yarn left, so I might make a couple more patterns too. Thank you, Kim. They're actually cool. I like the metal bit at the side. Gives it a bit different edge. They don't have the hinges on the edges like these do, so they're not as comfortable. But while we're in lockdown, I'm very happy to have a pair of reading glasses at all to my prescription. Hi there, Tiffany. Don't worry. Considering it's nothing o'clock in the morning for you, I'm surprised you're here at all. So, yeah, I'm surprised I could even get these in lockdown. Just think if this had happened 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to get glasses, especially to a prescription. Crazy. Oh dear. Rose, I would like to try and knit my cardigan arms on circular needles. I've never really done it before. Vintage, the pattern is all knitted flat. Yeah, it's just a case of switching the every other row and taking out the stitches that you'd used for seaming. So it really does depend on how experienced you are with knitting, on how really willing you're able to do that, and just shift the pattern a bit. Um, Elizabeth, I want to try colour work. Yeah. I filmed a colour work course about 18 months ago, and I never got around to editing it. Um, so I don't know. I probably really need to refilm it because even I have improved my technique since then. So I might do some videos relevant to these, but um, it might be a project further down the line instead of these exactly. But I will at some point have videos about colour work. Yeah, thank you, Kim. They are cool, aren't they? I really actually quite like them. They are cool hinges, yes. But I've got quite a wide face and I struggle to find glasses that fit me without hurting. So having them with just that little bit of give means that they are that bit more comfortable. Yes, Tiffany, they do have different elasticities. Oh my goodness. Cast-ons can be annoying because you have to it can be useful to use different ones. And I've knitted so many things in my life and pretty much every single time used the cable cast on and not really had a problem. So um it depends on where you want your knitting expertise to be. Um yeah. And there's that just this tiny bit more elasticity or a tiny bit tighter. Um so how much of a difference does it make to the finished garment? That's for you to judge and for you to say, actually, I really want to be that much of an expert or not. So, yeah, Mariam, I taught myself to knit in April. That's cool. DK yarn and 6mm needles. Luckily, I had my great mother's 3.2mm needles. Yes. DK yarn and 6mm needles will be kind of loose. Yeah. That's funny. I had a young friend, my friend's daughter came round in the late autumn 2019. And she was going to visit me more beginning of last year, but we just kind of said, no, we're going to find out exactly what all this is about first. And she'd been knitting with big needles and thin yarn. So I just said, right, let's make this easier for you. And she, oh, that's different. That feels better. So yeah, it can make a tremendous difference, especially as a beginner knitter, to make sure that the yarn matches the needles because it will feel so much more comfortable. The stitches will be malleable, they'll be visible, and they're not going to fall off the needles because they're too loose. And the fabric that you finish with, it will be easy to see whether you're knitting too tightly or too loosely, and tension in your stitches will be easier to practice. So that's good. Kim likes knitting colour work. Rose, are you asking me what I'm knitting? Well, I've just finished these scrunchies and I'm thinking I will just possibly come up with a couple more patterns for these. You know how much I love garter stitch? I think that is just gorgeous. Beautiful. I love that scrunchie. I love it. But I was knitting these as well. But I'm knitting this. This is on my needles at the moment. I will not divulge anymore. It's a secret. Oh dear. Jane, I taught myself one needle cast on method a couple of years ago from the YouTube tutorials, but for large pieces of knitting, I prefer the cable. Yeah. Yeah, the cable cast on method is really good. Mariam, have I bought anything from Hobbycraft? Actually, a Hobbycraft opened not that far from us. A couple of, it was before Christmas 2019. So like 15 months ago. And that was really the first time I'd ever been in one because we're not near a big city with any hobbycrafts or anything. And I've not really gone online. And I went through it, I had a really good rummage and really good look. but I just bought some stuff for my niece for Christmas because she is a craft addict. So I bought materials because if you get her a kit, then she will just pull it apart and use the materials for different things. So she needed materials. That's that. So that was that. I just said, you know, um, yeah, some of the stuff I was kind of impressed with, and other stuff I was going, now that could be better. But for kids who are very crafty, who just want stuff to play with, and then 2 weeks later they've forgotten it, I'd say it's probably worth it, but I don't know. Tiffany, it looks like a shawl. It does kind of look like a shawl because it's a triangle at the moment. Rosie, do I have any tips for knitting faster? Yes, and I could probably go through this much more if you were on the Knit and Natter this afternoon. And if anybody wants to join the membership and join the Knit and Natter this afternoon, you can. If you want to have a look. There you go, knitwithhannah.co.uk/invite. The 2 videos I will send to you on my channel, how to knit faster and different types of knitting styles. So that's the 2 things I would suggest you just take a look at. But yeah, if you want more tips, then we could talk about it personally. Come on video with me and I can just look at what you're doing and then I can help you with it one-to-one. Because if you're on a call with us on the Knit and Natter, then you can come on video with me. We can, obviously I'm not right here in person, you won't be sitting here, but you'll be on another video and I'll be able to see how you're knitting. And that would actually really help. Kim, oh, you've never knitted a shawl. Yes, stick that on your list, definitely. There are some lovely patterns out there. Lovely patterns out there. If I were you, I'd do a textured one first rather than a coloured one or anything fancy like that, because it's really interesting to just see the different methods on how you make the triangles. It really is quite a fascinating thing. There's a couple of books out there about triangular shawls, so that might be something. Elizabeth also said, recently learnt a new cast-ons and love how you can alternate cable cast-on. Alternate cable cast-on. Okay. Oh, Mariam, I was inventing a blanket on straight needles and couldn't count stitches. Oh my goodness. The stitches were jammed together. They were rock hard. Oh goodness. Sounds a bit odd. Yeah. Blankets I've knitted with stitches on the needles, maybe up to 150, possibly up to 200 stitches on the needles at once. When I've knitted a really fine shawl once, there were probably about 400 stitches on the needle. And then, that was before circular needles were really big, and available as they are now. I actually use 3 different needles. So I would knit across one, and then I knit across another one, knit across another one. And Dad said to me, yeah, my mum used to do that. So that was quite fun. Oh dear. So, yeah. Did you want to ask me anything else? Thank you for joining me today. It's been quite a quiet week on YouTube, actually. Not that much conversation, but I think people are going, New Year knitting, I have to do New Year knitting, and then it's calmed down a bit. So it's been really nice to see everyone here who's usually here, and a few newbies as well. Are there any topics you'd like me to cover next week? Anything else you'd like me to chat about? Let me just double check, see if there are any new comments I can just expand on. Oh yes, someone said they had a problem with a pattern where two stitches were one next to each other, but it didn't work. They were pattern stitches next to each other. K1B and K1B were sitting there next to each other, so the the pattern wasn't written very well. So it's really difficult about the choice you make about where you get the pattern from can actually really affect how easy it is to knit something. This is why people go, oh, I have to get a free pattern off the internet. I want a free knitting pattern for this or a free knitting pattern for that. If it's a free knitting pattern from a well-known manufacturer, because they just give patterns away sometimes, then it will be really well made. But if it's a free knitting pattern on a free knitting pattern website, because they're just giving stuff away, it may not be that easy to read and it may not be that well written. So there is a price you pay for not paying for a pattern. Sometimes it just may be that you can't read it very well. It's the stitches don't quite work next to each other, or it doesn't shape properly, and the abbreviations may not be described very well. So just be aware of that when you're looking for patterns online. I'd be really curious to find out more about this commenter's pattern that she's using. Marion, which interchangeable knitting brands do you recommend? I use Knit Pro, and those are the ones that we sell in the shop. If you need different sizes, then I can always get them for you quite easily. What I actually like about them now, because I've just started doing this, is they have different coloured cords for the different lengths. So that is really helpful. I'll pick it out. Oh, yes. Click. That's a shorter one, and that's a longer one. And you just get used to which is which. So definitely, if you want any that aren't the sizes that we haven't got, then we can get hold of them quite easily. And to be honest, I always, before I use these coloured ones, I've got the dark purple ones. It's actually been really useful for me to have two of each size, because I need an 80 I need a 80 centimeter one for this and an 80 centimeter one for that, and I got them on my needles at the same time. Yeah, why not? So just go for it. If you do want to expand your sizes, then let me know. Like I said, if it's not in the shop, we can get them, and I can easily just send an invoice instead of going through checkout, because we haven't got them in the shop yet. Heather, wishing you a wonderful week. Yes, you too, Heather. Continue to wander through the videos. Oh, thank you, Heather. Educational and delightful. Oh, bless. Thank you. Thank you. Tiffany's are coloured as well. It's really useful. Very useful. It's like some needles have coloured tops to them, and they're different colours depending on the side. Mariam taught a 6-year-old sister how to knit and purl, never looked back. Yes. Yes, you can have extenders on them. That is really cool. Are Knit Pro expensive? It's really difficult to say are they expensive, because they last a long time. So you don't have to buy them more than once. That's the thing. And I'm moving towards testing out some more of their tips as well. So yeah, expensive it's a question of how many times do you want to pay for them. Yeah, so casting on and increasing for sure, but yes, to learn. Yeah, and it's really fascinating to know how you make triangles in different ways. Most definitely. Certainly something you could do. And like I said, there are some decent books out there with options. Sure, I've actually looked for myself just to see what this. I wish there were libraries open at the moment. I really d I mean, I haven't looked for a long time, but as far as I was aware, since March, our libraries aren't open. So it's the kind of thing you'd find there. So I've been buying my books online since March. I used to get crafting books from the library and keep them for months and months and months. It was so funny. Like, oh, it's a coffee table book. I don't own it, but it's still there. It's another one. Oh dear, so funny. Right. It's lovely to see you all. I will see you again soon. I'm going to be filming this weekend. Exciting, exciting. And we're talking about a whole new topic soon. Next week's is kind of a beginner, but not quite a beginner. It's just answering a question that I get quite a lot. So yeah, just take a look at it. It'll be quite an interesting video, I hope. And I will think about. I'm definitely going to be filming this weekend, so it's tomorrow or Sunday. I cut my hair for it. Yeah, we'll move into a whole new topic further into February and all the way through March. So excited about that. And I will share more. Later on. Oh, Tiffany's library is open. That's cool. They're strict with safety, which is so nice. They even quarantine their books. They need a UV light there, don't they? Just shove the books into a UV light cupboard, and then it's clear. Anything good to say about lockdown? It's about it made me use up all the odds and ends of different walls. Yeah. Okay, I will see you all next week. I'll be here again, same time, same place. And if you want to join me this afternoon, then go to knitwithhannah.co.uk/invite, and you can come on video with me, and I can answer your questions face to face, and it can be a lot more personal about your very knitting that's sitting there on the needles. Okay, yeah, thanks for joining me. Bye for now. Happy knitting. Have a great weekend.